coming up. As we gear up for the great Christmas shopping frenzy, is Oxford Street facing a terminal decline?
So I think it just might not be quite the retail that we're used to.
And the scheme that aims to rehabilitate perpetrators of domestic violence.
Why should the spotlight be on always the focus and the pressure on the survivor victim? Put the spotlight where it belongs, which is the people who caused the harm in the first place.
Good morning. Great to have you with us for the programme. Hello, good morning. I'm Samantha Simmons. I'm joined for the duration of the show by Rachel Robertson, Conservative leader of Westminster Council, and by Rushanara Ali, Labour MP for Bethnal Green and Bow, who sits on the Treasury Select Committee. And as ever, if you'd like to join in the conversation at home, do follow us at BBC London News. Now, I want to start with the news of the by-election result in the constituency of Old Bexley and Sidcup, previously represented by the late James Brokenshire MP, where the Conservatives held on with a greatly reduced majority, though. Rachel, your reaction, first of all, at 10% swing to Labour?
I know, but the important thing is that the Conservatives have held the seat. We know that in by-elections, mid-term by-elections, very often voters use it as an opportunity to send a message to the government, confident that the actual government won't change in terms of the makeup of the government. And I think that's what we've probably seen here, but really good news that the seat has been held.
Rushanara, a 10% swing to Labour, but with all the criticism of the government at the moment, shouldn't the opposition be doing better here?
Well, look, we're really pleased with the progress we've been making and what we've achieved in this by-election, given the point we were at in 2019, where we lost so many seats. So it's a long way, to return from there. And so we've got to continue to work really hard to rebuild trust in our party, in the country, and to continue to hold the government to account. And that's what this result has demonstrated, that we are making progress, but we've got to keep working hard and redouble our efforts so that we can actually win seats in the future, including seats like this one. And I'm really pleased with the progress, and I'm really grateful to everybody for working so hard to get that swing in Labour's favour this time round, and it's a great place to build back from.
OK, well, let's talk about coronavirus now and the threat of this new Omicron variant. Rushanara, Rachel, are you confident that you think the government's got the right approach here, Rachel?
Yes, I think the focus is very much on making sure that everyone takes up the booster jab and gets vaccinated, which is absolutely vital. Clearly, we need to get much more information about this latest variant. But I think, the government is so well ahead in terms of the vaccination programme and doing everything it can to make the population safe.
OK, and what about in your constituency? Do you think the take-up, now that it's going to be offered to all adults by the end of January of the booster, are you confident that will go down well? People will take it up?
Well, look, we need to make sure that the government, working with London government, makes sure that people are encouraged to get the booster vaccine. There is low take-up in London compared to other parts of the country, and there's lower take-up between different boroughs. So we are going to have to really step up in ensuring that people are supported to get the vaccine as quickly as possible. That means more public information to encourage people to do that. And some of the work that was done last year with the vaccine programme in the first two, getting people to get the first two vaccines, there's a lot of that needs to be drawn on. The final thing I'd say is that it's really important the government ensures that the pre-travel PCR tests are done before people arrive in the UK, and lessons are learnt from the past so that this variant doesn't spread as quickly as the Delta variant has done. We also need to make sure that, given people will have to self-isolate if they are found to get the Omicron variant, that they're provided sick pay and other support, because that's quite a long, it's 10 days or so that they need to be at home. So there are other supports that need to be provided to people so that with the prevention is happening, it takes place. So, but the vaccine programme is so important, and like Rachel, I appeal to everybody in our city, but across the country, to get the vaccine. In London, we've been hit very hard by high death rates in the past, my constituency as well, and in particular, so we've got to make sure we get people vaccinated with the booster vaccine.
Just out of interest, Christmas parties, will you be having one?
I think the government's been very clear. The message at the moment is absolutely go ahead, but I think we have to be very mindful of the precautions that people have already put in place and adhere to that. And, you know, we follow public health guidance throughout. And I think it's also very important to remember everything that cities like London have done to ensure that it is safe for people to move around. We've done a whole range of things in Westminster around widening pedestrian areas and things like that, so people can feel confident about coming into the city.
OK, thank you. Now, once Europe's busiest shopping destination, Oxford Street has been badly hit, of course, by the pandemic. Shops are shutting with around 1 in 10 boarded up, and visitor numbers are hugely down. Famed for its many department stores, some are closing and others they're downsizing to meet a changing demand. So has the street had its day? Helen Drew reports.
Twinkling lights, shoppers laden with bags, just as you'd expect Oxford Street to be in December. But take a closer look and all is not well on this world-famous shopping street.
Starting at Oxford Circus, you're met by what was once Topshop's flagship store, now closed. You then get to House of Fraser, which will shut its doors for good in January. And just a couple of doors down, Debenhams, already closed. Not forgetting arguably the most famous shop on the street, Selfridges, and that's up for sale. A cool $4 billion, if you're interested.
Then there's John Lewis and Marks and Spencer, both planning to downsize retail and have more office space instead.
It will find its level. There will definitely be changes in the way we work, there will be changes in the way we come to shop and visit. But I think the great challenge for the West End is to give Londoners, and particularly that market, a reason to come back into the centre. And that's that mix of different uses beyond retail, the entertainment, the leisure. It's already happening. So look, it's going to take a little bit of time to figure this out. But I think the centre of the capital city, and the West End in particular, is going to need that stimulus and that demand to make sure it plays a really important role in the country's recovery as well.
With foreign visitor numbers way down and many people working from home, is this the end of a big centrally located shopping destination?
But sometimes you can't get the things you need locally. So like, you know, Christmas time, you know, this is an outing, you come down to the West End and yeah.
My daughters, they do online, but it's mostly returning is so much hassle, you know. It's not convenient at all. By coming out and seeing is much better.
I've also heard that there's an IKEA going in where Topshop's going. So that's meant to be the new kind of shopping. Homewares, I still think people are going to want to do homeware shopping in person to see what you can buy. So I think it just might not be quite the retail that we're used to.
One vision for the future of retail is this, the Collect. New Look used to be here but closed. So while the owner of the building looks for a tenant, Westminster City Council arranged for some small, independent pop-ups to have the space for free.
To me, it means everything really, because, you know, having this opportunity to just be in a place like Oxford Street and have a pop-up shop is huge, you know. I really doubt that a small business like mine would be able to afford a space like this, you know, long term, or if at all.
Footfall is hugely down on Oxford Street. But when the Christmas lights were switched on, there was a day when it was busier than before the pandemic. A glimmer of hope for this well-known street.
Well, Rachel, what's your view? We've talked a lot about Oxford Street over the past 18 months and the devastation that's hit it with the lack of people able to visit. Do you think if it's going to bounce back now is the time, and if not, what does the future hold?
Well, look, Oxford Street will absolutely bounce back, but what that highlighted, that clip highlighted, was the importance of rethinking the future of Oxford Street as a destination. And we need to focus on much more than just the retail. So I'm delighted that you filmed in the pop-up space, because that's about using empty units to showcase some really creative new businesses, but also we need to rethink the whole area to make it a great experience to come. So the public realm, the streets, the environment, but also the hospitality, restaurants, bars, the mix, the reason why people come there. Because with online shopping, they're not going to be coming just to shop anymore. They'll want to come for the whole experience of being on Oxford Street. And that's what we're trying to achieve.
So given that you say it's time to rethink the whole area, was it a mistake a couple of years ago for the council to turn down Sadiq's plans to pedestrianise parts of Oxford Street? And should you revisit that now?
No, we've been very clear clear that we're not going to revisit the plans to pedestrianise the whole of
Wouldn't
Oxford
it breathe
Street.
life into the
Well, we
area?
think that the plans that we're bringing forward will breathe life into the whole area. So, you know, how many people realise that there are great places like the Wallace Collection, which has this amazing art collection right on the edge of Oxford Street. We need to open up all of these areas so that people will come to the area, not just to shop, but also to meet friends for lunch, to be in a really pleasant place, but also to go and see a gallery, to do all sorts of other things. So it's part of the overall.
What is your objection, though, to pedestrianising that area?
The reason that we were concerned about that, there's a whole range of reasons, but one of the reasons was that what we don't want to do is to throw all of that traffic into the residential areas around it. So we need to be looking at how we can rethink the area and take forward its purpose, but without pedestrianising the whole length of it.
OK, Rushanara, what's your view? Is it time that we thought less about the West End and more about local high streets now, as that's probably where a lot of people are shopping more?
Well, look, the West End's taken a hit because of the pandemic and the reduction in tourism as well, for instance. So that's the other dimension to how we can make sure city centres get much more footfall. And of course, there are more competitors now. You've got Westfield in Stratford, you've got the other Westfield. So people have other centres, shopping centres, that they choose to go to that are more local, especially if they are Brits as opposed to tourists. So the tourism dimension is really important. We need to do more. The government needs to provide more support and working with London to make sure London isn't neglected in the debates around levelling up. I've heard too many times ministers talk about levelling up in a way that feels like London's all paved with gold, doesn't have issues, and other parts of the countries. And it shouldn't be either or. It should be about making sure London thrives. And East London, where we're seeing a lot more retail and hospitality, and really a lot of thriving, innovative work going on in terms of retail, but also in other sectors. We've got the Olympic Village, so the West End is getting a run for its money in terms of competition. But I hope that drives up innovation, and that drives up partnership between the city mayor and colleagues like Rachel, even if they're in different parties, because we all have a vested interest in seeing London thrive. And the transport dimension is another issue. The government hasn't got a settlement on with TfL, for instance, and London Underground's going to take a hit. That's going to have a knock-on effect on our economy as well.
Yeah, I'm sure plenty more to come on TfL
Yep.
in the coming weeks as well. Thank you. Now, 8 weeks ago, BBC London reported on the fate of Clare House in Bow, where residents say they were given just 48 hours to leave after it was found to have non-compliant cladding and a dangerous structure. We've been back to find out what's happened to the residents who claim they were promised permanent housing within a week of leaving, but are still living out of suitcases in temporary housing. Jessica Ewer has this.
It's 2 months since Aziz and his family were forced to leave Clare House in Bow.
It was a big panic, obviously, in Clare House, not just us, but the whole residents, because you had literally 21 floors, people sort of in mass panic. We were there 8 days. It was 8 days, he was still stressed out, and I think a lot of people panicked and they left because they were scared that the building was going to collapse.
Residents say they were promised permanent housing by Clarion. But after moving twice already, Aziz is facing another potential move in January.
I've got 2 children who have special needs, and they have they have their needs in terms of they're very routine based. Already this move has caused a big problem for us.
In 2018 we went to Clare House.
They're always asking you, they want to go back home, and then you have to explain to them, that's not home anymore, we've left and we're looking for another place, and then they want to know where we're going. You can't answer those questions.
Clarion took the decision to ask people to leave after a fire safety report. It found the building had non-compliant cladding and a dangerous structure.
Just telling us to leave, evacuate the building. They're not even telling us why.
So we said we'd like something local, and we haven't heard anything yet. We've been confirmed nothing.
A handful of residents have so far refused to leave, choosing to stay put in a potentially dangerous building over being rehoused by Clarion.
Well done.
The decision to leave when he did is one Aziz now regrets.
We were promised something and they hadn't kept to the promise, and we felt a bit cheated, because if we knew that that was the case, I think no one would have left him from Clare House. They would have made sure they put some demands before they left, because they had every right to do so. It was their home, and something that they lost, and technically everyone's homeless now.
Well, joining me now is Clare Miller, who is CEO of housing association Clarion. Clare, welcome to you. Thank you very much for joining us on the programme. Azizul, as you heard there, said that he was promised permanent housing. Why haven't you fulfilled that promise? Don't you have a duty of care to him and the other families?
We absolutely have a duty of care to all our residents in Clare House, and I am terribly sorry that it's been such a traumatic experience for some of our residents, but we did have to move them very quickly because we had to put their safety and well-being above all other considerations. For all the households in Clare House, we moved them out quickly and into temporary accommodation. And we are now working very closely with each of those households, matching their needs for accommodation to permanent solutions. And we're doing that, working very closely with the local authority. And I'm delighted to say that everyone from Clare House has now been given emergency priority status by the local authority, which means that we can begin the very process of getting people into permanent accommodation.
Why give people like Azizul those assurances when you couldn't fulfil the promise? He's now been moved twice with his vulnerable children. They live 2.5 miles from their previous home. It takes half an hour to get to school. It's not acceptable, is it?
So we have put in place arrangements to provide support and advice and guidance for all the households at Clare House. And I'm very sorry about the experience of Aziz. But what we have tried to do very carefully is to match the needs of individual households to the solutions that we are putting in place. Above all else, it is so important that those households are safe, and they were not safe staying in Clare House. And we had to act on the basis of the very clear structural advice we received from our consulting engineers.
It's been 4 years since Grenfell. Why has it taken so long to find out just how dangerous this building is?
So this is a building that was built in 1968, and after Grenfell, you will be aware that the government issued a series of guidelines about the work that needed to be undertaken to ensure that buildings such as this were safe. We have progressively undertaken work over a number of years, and as a result of that work, we have invested in Clare House and put in fire remediation solutions. But it was only in September of this year that it became clear to us that the latest intrusive survey revealed that the building, despite the investment that we had made, could not be guaranteed to be safe. And at that point, we absolutely had to get everyone out.
Residents who've spoken to us said that they believe that Clarion knew 8 months ago that this was a very dangerous building. Can you give us assurances that that isn't the case and that won't at some point come to light, that you didn't know previously?
Didn't know previously. The advice that we received on the 17th of September changed our strategy, and we have shared that advice with our residents so that they can understand why we had to act when we did.
This is the only building in your portfolio that has dangerous cladding, and yet it has still taken all this time. These families, these residents have been living there for 4 years in what is a structurally unsound, dangerous building. What would you say to them?
I would say that this building, we've done as much as we can to understand how this building would work. There's a combination of things at play here. So we have discovered that there are structural weaknesses in the building, and it is those combined with how the building would react were there to be a fire that led us to believe that the only safe course of action was to remove our residents and to place them in safe accommodation and to think about the longer term future of this building.
Rushanara, this is in your constituency, this building, and I know you're getting regular updates from Clarion. Are you satisfied what you've heard from Clare there?
Well, the situation is that we were told, I was told, and the council was told the day before people were told they needed to move. I was told on the day, and we've made some progress in terms of partnership working with Clarion to support them because obviously ultimately my constituents need all the help they can get. The problem is that even with Clarion, one of the largest housing associations in the country, with the supply of housing that Clarion has, it's going to take potentially up to a year to get people into permanent accommodation. And you've heard, and it's not just one constituent of mine who's been moved multiple times, a number of others will, and there are a lot of vulnerable people. So we need the government to step in to provide the support to those housing associations that need support, because this is not the only building. There's another building in my constituency where there was a fire recently, and that's a different matter. Okay. But the point is, there needs to be support. What we need Clarion to do is get people rehoused permanently, urgently, not in 12 months, but in the next few weeks. And I'm very concerned. People feel very let down. We need more transparency. The full report that was produced that Clarion based this decision on hasn't been shared with me or the council or residents. And, you know, Clarion receives significant amounts of public money, taxpayers' money, and they're not being accountable enough and transparent enough about those issues.
Claire, Rushanara says you're not being accountable enough and transparent enough. How do you respond to that?
We have given to the council and to the MP and to our residents the advice that we received, which our board made the decision on. So I have tried to be as open as possible with the circumstances that we are facing at Clare House. I have to say the MP and the local authority have worked very closely with us, and I would fully agree with Rushanara's comments around how...
Claire, just very briefly, will those families who are not in like-for-like accommodation be rehomed by Christmas? Can you guarantee them that?
So we've got 66 empty Clarion properties that we are beginning the process of matching households to. And working with the local authority, I would very much hope that we are able to exceed the MP's expectations.
So a hope, but no guarantee. Claire Miller, CEO of Clarion, thank you very much for being with us. Thank you. Now, during the pandemic, there has been a significant rise in domestic violence, with incidents in London up 9% on the previous year. Now, the Mayor's office has announced £2.4 million in funding for programmes aimed at perpetrators of domestic abuse. The money will go towards emergency housing, training for social workers and behavioural change programmes. Helen Price has more, and a warning, you may find some of the report distressing.
Domestic violence now accounts for 1 in 8 crimes recorded by the Met Police. The Mayor's office argued that a new approach is needed, one that targets the root cause of the problem. One of the most established behavioural change programmes for perpetrators of abuse is the DRIVE project, which works with the highest risk offenders. Shana was subject to domestic abuse from family members and partners. She wishes a programme like DRIVE had been available.
I'm a woman with 25 years lived experience of domestic abuse. I've had 2 forced marriages, one when I was a child, and today, you know, in 2021, I've escaped 3 attempted honour killings. You're constantly walking on eggshells, and I didn't want that for my children. So it turned into me managing this person and their emotions, and that was my full-time job. I wasn't thinking what's going to happen in a year's time, in a 6 months' time. I've seen people change. And this is why I'm a huge advocate for, you know, behaviour change programmes. I think my father could have changed earlier, sooner. My mother could have changed earlier, sooner. Those people who have abused me, and some of them have exploited me, could they have changed with the right intervention? Absolutely. Some of these perpetrators who harm us, you know, we still love them. Does that make sense? It could be someone very close to you where you still love them, and of course you want them to change.
An independent evaluation of the DRIVE project found that it reduced physical abuse by 82% and sexual abuse by 88%. Once set up, it costs just £2,400 per perpetrator. But the question remains, what role will perpetrator programmes play in tackling what campaigners have described as an epidemic of domestic abuse in London?
Well, joining us now is Professor Jean Fedder from Bristol University, who's heading up research programmes into domestic abuse. Professor, welcome to you. Thanks very much for being with us. Well, according to DRIVE, only 1% of perpetrators receive some kind of specialist behaviour intervention. Do you think that perpetrator programmes should be more high profile?
Absolutely. And there is some evidence that they are effective in reducing abusive behaviour. So it's and there's also a postcode lottery going on. I mean, they have been around for quite a long time, but depending on the area you live in, you may or may not have access to a perpetrator program. So I'm absolutely in favour of increasing funding to those programs.
Rachel, Westminster is one of the boroughs where this pilot programme will be operating. How do you feel about that?
Well, I welcome that, and clearly I think there's general agreement we all need to do much more to stamp out violence against women and girls and to really tackle this issue, but also more widely, because what we're hearing on the doorstep is just a real feeling that women don't feel safe walking around the city. And as the mother of a 22-year-old daughter, I can tell you I feel really strongly about this, and I'm very pleased that we're relaunching our Soho Angels scheme to around the West End to make sure that we're doing everything we can to keep those who are more vulnerable safe. But I think all of these actions in terms of really stamping out violence against women and girls are really important.
Rushanara, Tower Hamlets has the second highest per capita rate of domestic abuse incidents out of all London boroughs. Why?
Very complex set of reasons, but what we need is programs like this. We need resourcing, so this is a really welcome initiative, but we also need much more work and support provided to the police. The police, even when they bring convictions to the CPS is under a lot of pressure, don't have the resources, and now we've got, because post-pandemic, we've got a backlog in terms of the judicial system. So there are some systemic issues the government needs to get to grips with as well, alongside these sorts of preventative initiatives, in order to reduce increase the conviction rates of, for instance, attacks on women, and it can be in domestic cases, but in others. And the final thing I would say is that we need to redouble our efforts in making sure that the support structures that are available to women are beefed up, because they haven't been, and in constituencies like mine, that's a big issue as well.
Okay, Professor, given of course there are finite funds to tackle domestic violence, are perpetrator programmes a good use of public money?
Yes. My caveat is that we don't have as robust an evidence base for exactly how effective they are. For instance, we're in the middle of a randomized controlled trial trying to look at effectiveness and cost effectiveness. So I think you can't debate that there needs to be more investment in perpetrator programs, but that really has to be alongside robust evaluation. One of the things that impressed me about the mayor's announcement is that evaluation is hardwired, I hope, into the funding for these programs, because we don't actually know enough about what works for which men and in which relationships. And there really needs to be evaluation going along integrated with those programs.
And how long would that take? What would that look like, just briefly? well, you can get early results from a study that takes a year or two. I mean, our trial is actually going to be reporting 2.5 years down the line. But I think, there's no quick fixes here, because you do want the evidence, and particularly for programs that tackle some of the underlying trauma that these perpetrators have experienced as well, and a kind of trauma-informed approach. There is more work that needs to be done on that. Professor Jean Fedder, thank you very much for joining us. Fascinating to talk to you. Thank you. And if you've been affected by issues in that discussion, you can head to bbc.co.uk Action Line. Well, that is all we have time for this week. My thanks to my guests, to Jean, and of course to Rachel and to Rushanara. My thanks to you for watching. Have a great rest of your day. Goodbye for now.